So good morning, everyone. My name is Annika Lee, and I have the honor of being part of the SUPERCLUSTER team as the Membership and Communications Coordinator. And I'd like to welcome you all to our monthly Associate Onboarding webinar today. As a reminder, this call will be recorded, and we ask all participants to keep their lines on mute during the presentation to avoid any feedback. We will also be distributing both this recording as well as the presentation deck following the session for you to share with your teams. As the majority of our SUPERCLUSTER team is based in Vancouver, British Columbia, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathering virtually on the traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Before handing things over to Bill Tam, our co-founder and Chief Operations Officer, our goal is to have this be an engaging and informative session. If at any point you have a question during the call, we ask that you please type into the chat box and we will answer them in queue. In addition, we will be pausing periodically throughout the presentation to have anyone on the line who would like to introduce themselves to give them time to introduce themselves to the group. So if you could please just send a quick note into the chat box or use the raise your hand feature, and we will call on you to unmute your line and share a bit more about yourself. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Bill Tam now.
Thanks very much, Annika. Let me just do a sound check. Can you hear me okay, Annika?
Yeah, all good.
All right, terrific. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to meet you all on video, at least in Zoom, which we're all now very accustomed to. I want to go through a presentation, maybe just as part of our orientation, which Annika will pull up. But at the same time, I think one of the magical elements of what we try to do in sessions like this is to give our members and associates a chance to kind of introduce themselves. This is part of our networking piece. And through these sorts of conversations, we find that people are able to kind of find other organizations or companies that are interesting to them, and they forge partnerships, and that's a great start. So maybe by way of introduction, you are the cohort that brought us over 800 organizations that are now part of the digital supercluster. So give yourselves a hand, because as you guys all signed on, we kind of crossed a pretty significant milestone in terms of both the coverage and the size of the membership in the digital supercluster. So let me just start with, and maybe I think this view that I have, Annika, actually shows a preview of the next screen. Is there a different view that can make just the slide bigger? I think you're projecting what you're seeing as opposed to projecting the whole thing. So why don't you go back to the normal view and then just shrink the preview side of your screen. And as while Annika's doing that, for any of you who would like to kind of raise your hand or introduce yourselves, just type a little note in the chat box, and periodically as I go through this deck, there'll be a chance for us to open it up and for you to say a few words about who you are, your company, why you're in the supercluster. It's a great way for people to get to know your organization. Okay, Annika, all set? Perfect. If you could, is this the first slide then?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. Maybe just by way of background, the SUPERCLUSTER program for Canada has been one of the most transformative pieces on the innovation agenda for the country. And one of the backdrop reasons for why it got started, and it was announced that they were going to do something about this in 2016, and the program officially got started in 2018, but it was a realization that Canada has so much potential around startups and technology companies. And at the same time, you know, our rate of adoption, the rate of R&D, the rate at which companies are growing wasn't nearly what we thought it could be. And so as a consequence, you see some of the numbers there. You know, we ranked 12 out of 16 on OECD's sort of measure on innovation scorecards. Lots of our companies in tech are small or very small. As a consequence, you know, the survival rate has been more difficult for many of those organizations. And in general, the quest for competitiveness and productivity in our larger industry sets is challenged because, you know, these things are not as well connected as they could be. Next slide, please. So for us, we also saw the intersection of, you know, the needs to interconnect better the innovation landscape in the country, but also, you know, what's been happening in every part of the economy is the rise of data. And oftentimes people talk about this in the context of the fourth industrial revolution, but essentially this is the data economy, the digital economy, which is upon us. And if you look successively at all of the generations of industry revolutions over time, what you'll see in this fourth generation is not only sort of the scale, but the speed at which it's being undertaken. So all of this will undoubtedly reshape how the economies work, how society works, and is driven by everything that I think you guys are aware of. It's whether it's artificial intelligence or quantum computing, it's Internet of Things, and connectivity writ large, which is really driving changes in how companies will compete and operate, and as well as how we function as a society. Next slide, please. Without a doubt, I think the global data opportunity is significant. You know, there's some statistics that talk about the amount of data that's been generated over the last few years.
Sorry, Bill, I think your headphones are just a bit staticky. There's just a little bit of feedback.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut my video off for just a moment, and hopefully that will help. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'll turn it back on when we do some of the Q&A. So without a doubt, I think the rise of data is the volume of data that has actually been created in the last few years. It is about how much internet traffic, especially in the era of the COVID pandemic. I think we've seen this rise even more significantly over the last 7 or 8 months. And it's really about connectivity and the rise of connected devices. There's now over 70 billion smart connected devices, but there's going to be many, many more as Internet of Things starts to penetrate every aspect of all the materials that we have in our house and in our life. Next slide, please. So we were targeting the opportunity for digital transformation, which by IDC's estimate is going to be over $2 trillion that enterprises invest in this area. Next slide, please. And so maybe after this slide, I'll take a bit of a break and allow us an opportunity to introduce one another. But we sit in a context of a family of 5 superclusters across the country. We happen to be based in British Columbia and Vancouver, but we also have members and associates across the country, which I'll share sort of a map of that in a few slides from now. But located in Saskatchewan is the protein industry supercluster. In Ontario is the advanced manufacturing or next generation manufacturing supercluster. In Montreal, there's a supercluster that's focused on supply chain artificial intelligence called Scale AI. And then the Ocean Supercluster operates out of Atlantic Canada. But for all of the superclusters, we all have a national mandate. We have members that participate in our activities across the country. There are differences among the different superclusters and how it operates. But by far and away, I think the mandate of what we're trying to do is encourage collaborative R&D and actually build the bridges between those that need the innovation and those that produce it. So maybe at this point, I can turn it back to you, Annika, to see if anyone would like to introduce themselves.
Great, thank you, Bill. Could we have Courtney Cole, if you want to unmute your line and introduce yourself to everyone?
Thank you. Hey, Annika. Hey, Bill. And good afternoon to everyone else on the call. My name is Courtney Cole. I'm the CEO, founder of For a Healthy Me, Inc. We're a virtual care solutions provider we're based in Markham, Ontario. Our specialty areas of focus are cardiology, MSK, musculoskeletal, neuro, and cognitive care. What we use is AI, machine learning, but also depth sensing, computer vision technology to enable healthcare providers to not just remotely deliver rehab protocols, thereby preventing the patient from going to the hospital, but also gaming and other types of technology combined with clinical data, clinical applications to effectively move the center of care away from the hospital and into the community. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Nice to virtually meet you. Karen Chase from Tehama, if you want to unmute your line.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Karen Chase, Tehama Inc., located in Ottawa, and I am supporting the organization in industry and government program relationships. And just a little bit about Tehama. We coin ourselves as the easiest, most secure way to deploy a virtual workspace. Tehama is helping enterprises on a global scale create cloud-based virtual offices instantly, virtual rooms and virtual desktops anywhere in the world from any device. There currently is no other solution on the market today that connects remote workers with mission critical and data sensitive systems with the speed, agility, and unparalleled security and comprehensive audit trail via our built-in SOC 2 controls, real-time activity feeds, and session recordings that Tehama offers. Our interest in the SUPERCLUSTER is first and foremost, our founder, Paul Vallée, has an affinity for becoming an active contributor, if you will, to this ecosystem. And we are highly interested in the areas of digital twinning and how Tehama's technology can support and enhance and industry at large, but certainly enterprise organizations with their extensive data recording and analysis capabilities for their keyboard, mouse, and screen interactions on real-time data. So that's it for me, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Karen. So nice to see some of our partners from back east joining us here today. Peter Gamble from On the Job.
Hi. As you said, it's On the Job Inc., and we've created a platform. We're based in Calgary, but we've created an ed tech platform that allows an organization to capture its most important and most profound work experiences and convert them to an online gaming environment that can be delivered to a workforce to introduce critical thinking around any subject. And we've tested this in 7 different sectors with any kind of curriculum delivery augmentation. It's been a very powerful tool that allows an organization to also measure the rate at which individuals adopt the critical thinking principles being delivered through these stories. And we're very excited by its implications, despite the fact that it will accommodate any kind of story. We're specifically focused on the safety world. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Peter. Christiana from Deakin Insights.
Hi, everyone. Yes, good morning. I'm with Deakin Insight. We're a small management consulting company located in Vancouver. We have a number of areas of expertise, but I think for this particular collaboration, we wanted to note that we have a small but growing data science team. We do a lot of work with BC ministries and Crown agencies, in part to leverage data science and machine learning to help automate decisions that would otherwise be subject to lengthy review, or to help ensure that social services organizations are able to staff appropriately at the right time. We have a number of different use cases for our data science and machine learning capacities. We're particularly interested in the SUPERCLUSTER in order to forge partnerships and find collaboration opportunities. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. We'll do one more introduction and then we'll we'll continue on with the presentation and then come back to some of the people who would also like to do some intros. Chandana from Lifeguard Digital Health.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Chandana. I'm the Chief Security and Informatics Officer for Lifeguard Digital Health, located in Vancouver. Our flagship product, which was based for the opioid crisis, has been launched province-wide in BC in a few months ago. We are foraying into the senior care post-pandemic contactless solutions using IoT. So our interest in the supercluster is obviously collaborations, particularly in the precision medicine area, in the two categories, in senior care, opioid crisis, as well as developing algorithms, MLA. We are working with CDC in the mental health solutions area slightly, so we're looking at collaborations in that area. Apart from that, I'm also having a role in the MyPDX project currently with the supercluster as an advisory. That's our interest, and looking forward to working with everyone in collaborating with as many. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandana. I think you're joining quite a group of precision health organizations that we have in the supercluster, so welcome.
Thank you.
Bill, I'll turn it back to you just to keep on going with the presentation, and then we'll continue with more introductions after.
That's great. And thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. You're exactly the epitome of the diversity that we see in many of our members. So welcome aboard. If we turn back to the our attention to the presentation for a moment, what I'm going to do is do a bit of a walkthrough. Next slide, please, of how we operate.
Staticky, Bill, sorry.
Let's do this again. I'll just stop my video and I'll just talk through the next few slides.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So just to maybe reinforce, I think, some of the principles of how we got started. You know, the purpose for us is really about how we can interconnect these innovative Canadian enterprises and really elevate their opportunity by connecting them with other teams, whether it's industry partners that will adopt the solution or other sort of organizations, so that we can actually accelerate the outcomes and build really bold products and solutions. So that is ultimately the purpose that we're trying to undertake. Next slide, please. And there is a charter of values that I think is really quite important in how we formed this. Unlike perhaps ways in which other programs have operated, the strength of the membership comes from a shared set of values and beliefs that underlie everything that we do. So as exemplified here, you know, one of the quests that we had was to build diversity in the membership so that we could create the conditions for the best and brightest to contribute to these really bold concepts and opportunities. It's to operate with transparency and collaboration such that partners understand how they contribute and in what way they can be most effective together. There's an orientation around what results we're trying to drive towards, both in the project, in the programs, as a supercluster overall. There is also a sense of how we will, by doing this as a team rather than as individual organizations, there is built in this concept of a greater good, because what this allows us to do is, through that sharing, also benefit the ecosystems in which we operate, whether it's regional or on a national basis, and ultimately providing sort of an environment which respects, at the same time being bold in our pursuits, but respects the fact that all the contributors to projects and the supercluster all have value, and therefore we construct the agreements, we construct the relationships that ensure that we have a leveling of how people participate in those things. Next slide, please. So the goals that we have, ultimately, we are co-investing in collaborative R&D projects. And as with any other R&D pursuit, it's really about building globally competitive products and platforms that can scale and succeed across the world. It is about intermixing different players and building the basis for powerful partnerships and those sort of relationships that can endure. It is about increasing sort of the strength and diversity of the talent pool, not only in the way that they understand how digital applies, but even in the mindset of what collaboration can look like and the opportunity to kind of build up that expertise in Canada. And ultimately, for many of you that are startups or SMEs, it's really to help that scale and help you grow so that it can enhance the overall performance of the Canadian technology ecosystem. Next slide, please. So there are several program areas that we would deem to be our areas of focus. When we first started, the top three were really the technology program areas that we were most focused on. And then the capacity building one at the very bottom actually outlines what we had planned to do around ecosystem building and really building up the skills capabilities in Canada. So the Data Commons program was really about recognizing that with the onset of more and more data and more data repositories, one of the common issues that we saw across all industries was the ability to interconnect this and make use of that information in a manner that could truly improve their operational effectiveness and elevate their competitiveness. And in some cases, it's about tying together these different data sets across different enterprises, and sometimes through a mix of public and private capabilities with all the necessary components of privacy, security, access, and the things that would actually make that the most useful utility that you can garner. So that is what the Data Commons program is about, is actually about building platforms and products that can leverage that. The second area is around digital twins. And as Christiana had mentioned, you know, there's an awful lot of interest around how you can build real world replicas of processes, of factories, hospitals, mines, forests, really in a virtual basis, and is using our technologies around virtual and augmented reality and creating environments. Sometimes this is the replication of the environments. I really like the concept of digital twins for office and enterprise environments, because I think we've been all living through that over the last 7-8 months. But ultimately, it's leveraging the Canadian capability around those sorts of technologies that can really have an impact. The third area is around precision health, and several of you kind of have introduced yourselves in that area. It is absolutely about taking data and information and really being able to intermix it with the precision that's necessary for individual wellness and an individual sort of health journey. And I think that touches on health systems, it touches on the manner in which we deliver care, it touches on how data is used across different information sets, including genomics, clinical information, maybe even hospital administration information. And it's really about how we can fundamentally change the course of how health is delivered. And I mentioned a little bit about capacity building earlier. It's about really what can we do to scale up the skills and digital competencies across our ecosystems in Canada. And then the COVID-19 program was something that we launched in March of this year. It was in direct response to the pandemic. And really, we had allocated about 60 million of our portfolio of investments towards helping Canada to respond to that. And in total, we have somewhere around 36 or 37 projects that we have now invested in into supporting that effort. And that program closed in July of this year. So in all of these areas, I think we have quite a number of investments. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, it's about R&D projects. We do undertake a competitive selection process. And the reason for this is because despite the fact that we were benefactors in roughly about 150 million of federal funds, intermixed with investments that we're seeing from industry partners and many others, the reality is there are many more projects than we could otherwise fund. So we go through a really sort of well-oiled competitive selection process for that. You know, what we're really ultimately looking for is industry-led innovation. And that will include and may include many other actors, including post-secondary and researchers, as well as not-for-profit organizations. But ultimately, this program is oriented around industry-led initiatives. We are looking for collaborations. We are evaluating the strength of the teams that come together and what they can bring to the table to really pursue the project that they have proposed. And what we do is we provide matching co-investment alongside the industry investments to de-risk the investment overall for the consortium, and in some cases to help to accelerate the pathways, because obviously with more resources, more can be done. And we've seen commitments that can run the gamut from less than a year to commitments and projects that will run for 2 to 3 years. So we have a whole portfolio of different types of projects around that. So maybe with that, Annika, now that I've gone through the overview, it'd be a good time to go back and see if there's more introductions that people would like to make at this point.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Bill. Just continuing off of the list, we have Darcy from ProLucid Technologies.
Yes, hello everyone. Great presentation so far. So I'm Darcy Bockard, CEO with ProLucid Technologies. We are a software commercialization firm. So we help companies that are looking at building connected applications from firmware through cloud and mobile desktop integration all the way to analytics, whether it's prototyping or enterprise. We work with companies to do that, and very excited for potential opportunities.
Great. Thank you so much, Darcy. Nice to meet you. Albert Tai from Hypercare Inc.
Sorry guys, hey, I'm Albert and I'm the CEO of Hypercare. We help clinicians collaborate in real time. So replacing pagers, fax machines, we're in mental health, long-term care, nursing homes, and all the way to entire hospitals.
Thank you so much, Albert. Javier from Rio Tinto.
Yes, hi. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all. Thank you for having us. And my name is Javier Sanchez. I work for Rio Tinto, which is a global metals and mining company. In Canada, we're focused on primarily where I work is the aluminum industry in British Columbia and in Quebec. And we are very interested in joining the SUPERCLUSTER because we have currently a digital transformation program where we want to be able to better engage with industry and be able to contribute back. So how are we able to work with different partners that can bring us innovative ideas? We do have a lot of expertise on the aluminum production, but we want to shake up the tree in terms of what are those things out there that can help us do things better in ways that we never thought of before. So quite excited to explore new things for our business as we transform it.
Thank you so much. It's great to see some partners from other superclusters joining the Digital Technology Supercluster. If we have any other introductions people would like to make, feel free to type into the chat. If not, we'll continue on with the presentation.
Thanks, Annika. And maybe just that just reminds me, thanks, Javier, for indicating that you're also working with Scale AI, the supercluster based in Montreal. It helps to answer a question that often new members and associates do have is, you know, how does it operate among the superclusters? And what we all do is we encourage organizations that are interested to join multiple superclusters and participate in collaborations as they're able to in those other superclusters as well. So it's good to see Rio Tinto's taking advantage of that. So welcome, Javier. So I think we talked a little bit about this slide. If we can move to the next slide, that would be great. So this leads me to kind of talking a little bit about how we operate inside the community itself. There are really two levels of membership. I think for many of you on this call, you've joined as an associate member, which I think is a starting point on the membership journey. That's really the entry point by which organizations can come and participate in our events and activities, find partners, look at project opportunities, propose projects through our selection process. And if it's ultimately a project that you're successful in being part of, that's when we have an opportunity as an organization to invite you to join as a full member. The supercluster, the digital supercluster is ultimately a member-driven organization. The constitution of the organization is a not-for-profit for which the members serve on the board. It helps to set our strategic direction, and it also helps to fund some of the operating costs associated with building these collaborations. So at the point in time where you have a successful project, we'll invite you to become a full member, and members ultimately, as I mentioned, they are the ones that drive the organization, but they also contribute fees and other contributions into running the operations. And that's really the two levels that we have today. So let me break that down on the next slide. So ultimately, we have over 750 organizations across the spectrum of startups and SMEs to large companies and those that would choose to adopt digital transformation solutions, multinationals, research and research universities, institutes, colleges, not-for-profits and government agencies. And some of the original ones that we had are the ones that show on the right. We now have many, many more organizations across the country. And if we move to the next slide, you'll see that our member distribution now, we're actually quite proud of the fact that in the origin days, you know, about 90% of our membership was in British Columbia. Now, half of our membership is across the country, and we now have members in every province of the country. Next slide, please. So part of joining the supercluster, even as an associate, is it's really about engaging with us in a number of areas. You know, I mentioned that we run events to try to connect members and associates like we are today. But there are many other events that we run that really are targeted towards either education and learning on specific technology types, or it's workshops and opportunities to connect more specifically on how to build projects or how to build the collaborations that will make your organization realize the objectives by which you had signed on. So those are some of the events that you'll see on a member calendar. You'll find them on our resource portal. So as part of joining the supercluster, you will have received access to our resource portal, which you can log into off our website, but it is really a one-stop place for you to get information pertaining to upcoming events, and also all the tools and tips related to guides and information about our calls for projects. And ultimately, if you want to connect with other members, there's a member directory there that you can make use of. On the bottom left, I'll talk a little bit about connections. You know, the member directory really is, we started with just a listing of where members are. We find that the interchange of ideas really comes from two places. One is opportunities to kind of bring people together either physically or virtually like this. There's follow-ups that happen relative to these sorts of events that really make the member directory come alive. You'll also see the member directory, you know, has reference to capabilities that other organizations may have. So it's a useful thing to try to find what kind of companies do particular things. And where this all leads is there is also an ideation hub that's set up on the member resource portal. And that's an area where you can kind of explore concepts where people can brainstorm together with other members and associates. It's sort of the precursor to having the project concepts fully baked. It really is set for ideation, and hopefully you'll take advantage of that capability. Next slide, please. So I talked earlier about what it actually looks like in our model consortium. And what I mean by this is we're trying to do a few things simultaneously. One is to help organizations that are trying to adopt technology to kind of realize the potential of digital transformation. So on the left-hand side, you'll see industry partners and in brackets, customers. Those are ultimately the organizations that are seeking to gain benefit from the digital transformation piece. And why they're so important in this mix is it gives an anchor point for the reason for doing the project and the first evidence that it has some merit relative to a potential market that this product will solve for. On the top left, you'll see that there are one or more technology lead partners in building the product or technology or platform that is ultimately the basis of the solution. There will be co-development partners. These are technology companies typically that have specialized expertise that can contribute towards really kind of building out what's needed in the product. Bottom left, you'll see there's technical service providers. These are often players that will ensure that the product or service or platform will fit in the context of the industry partner's environment. So this is really about ensuring that it, all the customization and aspects actually kind of work within what's needed for the customer. And then post-secondary research partners, this is really important for us to really be able to pull through some of the core research that has been done, define commercial paths for that, and really augment the product or service or platform to a whole new level. And for us, our participation in this model consortium is really there to co-invest and provide funding to this effort. But as important is to ensure that the framework by which collaboration has to first start, we can help to kind of get that all set up. So that's really what we mean by a model consortium. Next slide, please. By the way, if you have any questions about these slides or anything I've mentioned, please feel free to put them into the chat so that we can try to answer them at the next point of this session. So the benefits, I think, well, you've all joined, so I can do a little less of a sales pitch on you, but I think I heard in the introductions that some of you talked about building strategic relationships. You know, for some of our industry partners, it's really to solve some of the challenges that they have. In some cases, about mobilizing investments and targeted in areas that are really of interest to them. And I think one of the areas that we've discovered in the two and a bit years that we've been running this is it really has been an opportunity for teams within your organizations to really develop their skills. And it's not only in the context of collaboration, but it's all the soft skills associated with working in this sort of environment. And then also championing how that might be the kernel of how innovation would apply within your own organization. So that has been a big part of the benefits to many organizations who have been part of the SuperCluster for some time. Next slide, please. So we have many, many projects. We now have about 65 projects that are on our website. They do follow the track of the 5 different program areas that I mentioned earlier. You can read about them. There's a short descriptions, there's long descriptions. There's a little bit of information about the companies that are also leading these projects. And if you have any questions about any of the projects or programs, let me know. But I think one of the reasons why the member directory is an important tool is when you do come across projects that are interesting, there is contact information associated with the members for each of those that you can find on the member directory. So that's a pathway to reach out and find out more. And so certainly would invite you guys to do that. Next slide, please. I think that is the conclusion. So without further ado, maybe I hand this back to you, Annika, and we can moderate a bit of a Q&A, or if there's any additional introductions that people would like to raise their hand for.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. We have one final introduction from Elio from Shape the Business app. If you want to go ahead and unmute your line.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for you that are in West Canada. I'm in the East Canada in New Brunswick. I'm part of the percentage of New Brunswickers that are associated with Digital SuperCluster. I'm CEO at Shape the Business app. What we do is to provide ERP software, enterprise resources planning software. We have a lot of competitors here in Canada. We are still a startup here in Canada. We are originally from Brazil, and we have decided to develop our own ERP software instead of instead of commercialize third-party solutions since 2017. And we are interested in participate in the Digital SuperCluster because I think it's a way to get involved with tech-based leading companies here in Canada. and to having access to opportunities of collaboration and to increase our knowledge about how the IT environment, IT landscape is in Canada, to be better prepared to do business here in Canada as an IT company, as well as to contribute jointly with other members and associates of the Digital Supercluster. I'd like to thank you very much for being part of this initiative.
Thank you, Elio. So Bill, we do have a couple questions. We have a question from Karen regarding if it's mandatory to include post-secondary or research partners in proposed projects.
Okay, thanks for that question, Karen. We have, I think, slightly different requirements in each of our program calls that we do. For our technology leadership program, that would be Data Commons, Precision Health, and Digital Twins program. We have had a requirement, very explicit, that a consortium must have a minimum of 3 organizations as part of it, one of which must be a small or mid-sized company or a startup, and the other that must be a post-secondary institution of some form or research institution. That has been how we've run all of the calls for projects up until now over the last couple of years. It has been a real differentiator for us to do that because of the importance of ensuring that we build those linkages between industry and research. Having said that, we're in the process of developing the rules around our next call for projects, which will come out in the next several weeks. And I expect at this point anyway, that it'll be very similar to what we've done in the past. The reason I made a proviso is that for the capacity building projects and also for COVID-19, we did have slightly different rules for that. In the COVID-19 one, for the most part, there wasn't that requirement around post-secondary involvement. I think many projects did have post-secondary involvement, but it wasn't as germane given the urgency by which we need to get those projects underway. And then in the capacity building side, because so much of the delivery is dependent on sort of not-for-profits and post-secondary and other institutions, I think in almost every case, it was almost a default that they were really driving some of those efforts there. So hopefully that answers your question, Karen.
Thanks, Bill. We have a couple questions from Courtney Cole. Courtney, do you mind unmuting your line?
Sure. So Bill, my questions were related to the first, I guess, set of the first call related to COVID-19 related projects. It seems there was an allocation of 60 million, but only 30 was allocated for projects. If that is correct, will there be a second call, seeing that we're sort of on the edge of the abyss again? Here in Ontario, we had the highest number of cases at 700, which is even higher than what we had in the first phase, and that's just for today. So I'm wondering if there will be a second call. And then secondly, you know, I noticed that the projects that were funded, one of the areas that was sort of underrepresented, and I might be incorrect, was mental health, specifically youth mental health. And I ask, one, because we've done a significant amount of work in developing validated solutions in the youth mental health space with our partners at York University and CAMH, but also because all the data that we've seen from different parts of the world is telling us that the biggest impact of the lockdown, of the pandemic, has been on the youth population. So it's a multi-level question, but I hope you got it all.
That's fine. I'm glad that you asked a multi-level question, Courtney, because it gives me an opportunity to give a multi-level answer. So, and I think it's, so in answer to your first question, all of the 60 million has now been committed to projects, unfortunately. So although maybe the announcements that you've seen on the website maybe haven't fully caught up to some of the final ones that we're contracting, it has all been selected. Having said that, you are absolutely right. We are only in the, we're only seeing the first glimpse of the second wave, and the need for vigilance and more projects is very, very clear to us. The challenge we have is sort of the the capacity in terms of the funding that we have to do more. It already constitutes 45% of our investments as it is. So we are trying to work with our colleagues in the Government of Canada to see if there's additional funding that they might be willing to kind of provide through to expand the program. So I think at this point, what we'll probably do in our next call is in our precision health stream. Of course, there's a lot of overlap between COVID-19 and precision health. So we expect that there will be COVID-related projects in that call for projects, but also I think there will be the duality of dealing with the pandemic as it sits today, but also the future opportunities that the products or solutions might also be able to solve. In your final question about mental health, we absolutely agree that that is one of the key elements that needs to be addressed. I think we have somewhere around 4 or 5 projects that are focused on mental health. There could absolutely be more. I think we evaluated quite a number, Courtney. We do have one in particular that's focused on youth. It's associated with Foundry and a company called Thrive. We have others that deal with substance abuse, both for healthcare workers as well as for the public at large. We have a project that's out of Calgary that's actually trying to do predictive things on what's going to happen for people in different demographics associated with mental health, so we can have more of a response, more of a predictive ability to respond to the crises that we have yet to fully understand yet. And so there are quite a number. I realize that it's not necessarily categorized in a way that makes it easy to see because there's just a listing of all these projects. But I'm happy to give more insights, Courtney, afterwards and share with you the specifics of some of those projects, and would certainly encourage you and others to put in projects as part of the next round that might deal with exactly those issues that you identified. Annika, next question.
Thanks, Bill. We don't have any questions in the queue. If anyone does have any final questions, feel free to just unmute your line and hop on.
Looks like Peter has raised his hand, so.
Thank you. Yeah, I was very interested in what you were just talking about. I have half a dozen questions around that, but I'll just focus on, I'm curious as to whether there's certain programs that get a lot more attention. I'm presuming because of COVID-19, it's really revolving around the subjects that you just referenced and so many of the subjects that the existing associates in this call are focused on. Is that true, or do you try to balance it out amongst all the programs?
Very good question, Peter. We have tried to balance it across the board, and I think to a degree we've been reasonably successful in that. About in our portfolio that excludes COVID-19, there's about 40% of our projects are in precision health, and roughly about 30% in each data commons and digital twins. We see a fair bit of overlap between precision health and data commons because an awful lot of what organizations are seeking to do is to try to build bridges to connect what would have been disparate information sets really as a kind of foundation level. So there is some interplay there. Even in our COVID program, although many of the projects, roughly about 35, 36 of those projects there, I'd say my estimate is somewhere around 60%, close to 2/3 of the projects are health related. But the other 1/3 to 40% really deal with analytics and capabilities that are outside of health. And I would include, from Courtney's question earlier, mental health is actually in the 60 to 2/3 sort of bucket. And if you separated that out on its own, because there are different realities there that, involve different types of agencies and whatnot, then it's probably closer to half on the traditional health side versus, say, in mental health. So hopefully that gives you a sense, Peter, as to what the distribution of projects has looked like in the past.
Thank you. Can I add one more quick question? I'm just wondering about the mental health question that Courtney brought up. When you refer to those 4 projects or any number of the projects that are in existence, is there opportunity to actually engage in those projects, or is that already kind of that space filled within the context of any given project you're referencing?
Yeah, really good question, Peter. So the way in which those consortiums come together, and once we've selected a project, we go through a process of contracting that, and the contracting involves the multiplicity of players in that consortium, and in some cases it may involve advisors and other organizations in it, they sign a multi-party agreement that we call a master project agreement that confers the rights and obligations to all the players, and also sets out the governance around that project. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the key things in adhering to our charter of values is ensuring that we have a mechanism that that codifies the respect of all the consortium members in a collaboration framework. So I only give that as background because once we've got a master project agreement, then the question is, well, how does it work and if they want to have new participants come into the project? And so there's a couple of vehicles for doing that. Certainly if the project team discovers that there's a capability that they didn't realize that they needed, and they need to add another consortium member, there is a mechanism to make a change to their agreements and to add an additional party to the agreement. It's fairly straightforward. But one of the things that is a consideration is that typically the budgets for these contracts is set in advance. And so what it really means is if they introduce a new player with new contributions, they'll probably have to look at a new division of the pie associated with where the funding's coming from and what the contributions are. In some cases, that may complicate the project. In other cases, it may be exactly very straightforward and they want to do it. I would say in many, many other cases, what projects have done is they've said, you know, that is an interesting capability and we'd like to do that. Maybe we can do that in the next phase. So the next phase is really an area where we will consider follow-on investments into projects. So that might be a spin-off project that's done. And in those situations, that's oftentimes where new members or new associates can get involved in the project, is really on the spin-off or on an incremental project on top of what's already been done. So I certainly would, as I mentioned earlier, encourage you to take a look at projects, to reach out to members who might be leading those, to learn more about it as you can. And it may be a case where you know, there'll be a sorting out of when's the most appropriate time for you to have contributions that can be beneficial to that project.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions, Annika, on the chat or otherwise? Hands up.
I don't see anything right now. As always, if you do have any additional questions, feel free to email us. You can contact me at ailey@digitalsupercluster.ca, and we'll be sure to try and answer your question as soon as possible. Just to sort of wrap up the webinar today, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us, and of course to Bill for leading the presentation. We are so excited to have all of you part of our innovative community, and it's great to see the diversity in the group, and we really look forward to working with you all. As said previously, we will be sending out this recording as well as links to relevant resources on our website to learn more about how you can get involved. And yeah, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out. And once again, thank you so much for joining today, and we wish you and your families a safe and healthy rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.